Hi, everyone. It's the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And I'm Dr. Hinson.
And we are going to be particularly doctory today.
Putting on the doctor hats.
Because we have some thoughts on this.
On this book.
And the brand that is Rachel Hollis. Not Rachel Hollis as a human.
No,
we don't know her.
We don't know Rachel Hollis.
But we're going to talk about capital R, capital H brand.
Yes.
We have a couple concerns about, from an academic perspective, also just from a good practice of being a human being perspective.
Yeah. From a writing perspective, like it's based in our experience in academia, but it's really about how you write and how you use other people's ideas.
Yeah. And then I have some, I'll be shocked, concerns regarding some of the pop theology that's happening that is
Pop theology
is a bit of a damaging assumption. We want to be clear, though, that we know this works for a lot of people.
Yeah, clearly.
It works for a whole lot of people. One of our fears is that because of the language that is being used about Rachel that has reached guru levels, that people who are not resonating with it may feel that they have missed something or feel shame
or feel like they can't, like, you know, we the reason we talk about so many different books and so many different perspectives here at Abbey Research is like we know that different words and language and philosophies truck with different people all the time.
Absolutely.
Dr. Donnelly and I find inspiration from different things. Everybody finds inspiration from different things. And our concern is that because she is so big now, that people feel like there's something wrong. It's like that list you got in high school that was like all of the, literature books you had to read.
And you stand around college parties and everyone's like, I love Tale of Two Cities. And you're afraid to be the person that's like, Charles Dickens sucks.
I got through the first 3 pages of A Tale of Two Cities and was like, nope, I can't read this. It does not truck with me. So we want to be here to say we are two people that, for all of our valid critiques of Rachel Hollis that we are going to get into, her philosophy doesn't truck with us. And we know that there's people out there that feel that way too. And we kind of wanted to create this space to say it's okay to not love these people.
And also that critical engagement is an important thing for any wisdom. I mentioned it in a blog post last week when I touched on this subject briefly. We're hoping you're critically engaging with us too. Like, don't take anything we're telling you at face value, because everyone's on a learning journey.
Yeah.
We have some frustrations that all the things we're about to raise on Rachel's second book were raised on her first, and she chose not to engage with those critiques, which is also to us a signal of somebody that we don't want to be learning with. And that doesn't bother a lot of other people. So, and just our bias is up front. Rachel talks a lot about being a mom. If you've never met us before, neither one of us are.
Yeah.
And she talks a lot about being a white Christian lady. I am a white Christian lady. Erin is a white, not Christian lady. But we were both raised in the cultural assumptions of Christianity that come with America. Mm-hmm. And so there are pieces of her that should make sense to us. And I think that's why we are so adamant that they don't. And
one of my first critiques when I read, what was it, Girl Wash Her Face, was that, it's 100% valid to come from a particular perspective and write about your perspective. So I'm not saying she shouldn't write about the fact that she's a white Christian lady at all, because that informs who she is and that informs her philosophy and her theology and all of that stuff. But my problem with it was she didn't recognize in her writing that other people, for lots of reasons, wouldn't identify with that.
And
not white, not Christian, not American, not middle class, not living in California, not from Texas, like any of those things that are very, very specific to who she is and how she writes about her life. She didn't leave space for those of us that don't fit that box, and that our experiences might be different. Our philosophies might be different. Our attempts to start our own business might be different because of all of these factors. So that was something that was a problem in Girl Wash Your Face, and it would continue to be a problem in Girl Stop Apologizing.
And we need to pause here before we really get going and say that we are not the first people or the only people pointing these things out.
Oh, no.
And we are particularly indebted to Catherine Beatty of Christianity Today, who
Yeah.
wrote an incredible analysis, which is entitled Girl, Get Some Footnotes. And we'll be linking to that in the show notes, as well as the good folks at at BuzzFeed.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall off the top of my head, but we'll link to it. And again, at the Plagiarism Watchdog Digital Content Police that have linked to this a lot. Additionally, there is lots and lots of chatter on the internet about this particular thing. So while our ideas are ours, our critiques are not just ours. So let's say all that.
Okay, so we've kind of tipped our hat a little bit at what we're starting with our major critique here of the book is. But I wanted to explain kind of where we're coming from. We're academics. You know, we have multiple degrees at an academic level. And when you're trained at that level, one of the things that's hammered into you in all of your writing, anything you ever write professionally within an academic circle, you have to cite. You have to show where the facts, ideas, philosophies, opinions, anything that is not your idea, your analysis, your interpretation, has to be footnoted, has to be cited. It's like, you know, we use this analogy all the time when we explain it in our work at Abbey Research. It's like showing the work on a math problem. Like, you can't just say, here's the answer. You have to say, here's how I got to this answer. And there's a lot of reasons for this. And it comes down to, you know, what is plagiarism? So plagiarism is when you write about someone else's idea, concept, fact, whatever.
Phrase.
A phrase, if you use the same words as they do, without saying where you got it from. And so it appears as if it is your own idea. When you don't say, you know, pick a book off my shelf. Susan McKay wrote in her book, blah, 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 blah. If I don't say that and just include what Susan McKay wrote, I'm plagiarizing her words and her ideas. And so it's something that we, you know, our doctoral theses had to pass a level of original thought. It was literally scanned to make sure that we weren't plagiarizing other people's ideas.
And I think I had 25 pages of citations, I think.
Yeah, I had a lot of citations as well. So there's two reasons why this is really important. One, it shows that you're able to engage with other people's ideas and to analyze them and to understand the evolution of these ideas, where they came from, how they got there, why this person is saying what they're saying. So it shows your ability to do that. And number two, it also shows that you recognize that people have done work before you. And that's what I think is really, really important when we're looking critically at what Rachel Hollis does is, you know, she's not the first self-help guru. We all know this. There's a huge, long, long line and legacy of people that have come before her. And you have to pay homage to those people. You have to recognize that these people did the work before you. And that it's okay to engage with their ideas critically. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make this video. We engage with other people's ideas all the time. We did a book club all last year where we looked at what other people had written and we engaged with it and we added our interpretation but you know what? We always said where we got those ideas from. And so for us, the biggest criticism that we have had with Rachel Hollis, as Dr. Donnelly said, has been this work has been done before us by our esteemed colleagues that we mentioned at the beginning of the video, and we'll make sure you have access to them. And that she uses ideas in her book that are not her own, and she does not, which is fine because we all do that, but she doesn't give credit to those people. She doesn't cite them. There's 2 pages of footnotes in the back, I think.
Yeah, and they're all from the internet.
They're all from the internet. And I think where she's coming from when I read this, there's a little bit of an anti-intellectual bias that she's operating on. She mentions that she's both in Girl Wash Your Face, more so I think there than in Girl Stop Apologizing. She talks about her lack of education or her perceived lack of knowledge about things. And I know that like talking about academics can be really dry and boring, and we can sound really, you know, snooty to be nitpicking on this kind of thing. You don't have to be a, you know, an intellectual, quote unquote, to write a book, obviously. But you also, that doesn't give you a pass from taking other people's ideas, which is where we draw the line. And she really, there's a line that I wanted to get right. She talks about using Google to answer questions. So on page 158, she says, I swear to you, the answer for literally everything exists on the internet for free. Just ask Google. And the thing about it is, yeah, you can find a lot of information on Google and on the internet. And that's a wonderful thing that we all have this access now from kind of the universality of the internet. But those words and ideas aren't for free. You have to say where you got them from. And there are a couple really stark examples of where she got ideas that are, to me, very clearly not her own. I'll go into one really briefly and then turn it over to Dr. Donnelly to talk a little bit more about it, because the articles we're going to link to talk more about the specific ideas. But the one that struck me, outside of the ones that were used in examples, just because we talk about it a lot. At Abbey Research, we did a couple webinars at the start of the year on SMART goals. So SMART in all caps, and it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and relatable and timely. And this was created by a man, his name is going to escape me, which is ironic, but I'll find it for you and link it in the show notes. But this idea of SMART goals was first written about in 1983, I think, in a business journal by a man who was working in business. And he is generally believed to be the person who originated the idea of SMART goals. So when we talked about our interpretation of SMART goals, we made sure to reference him and say, hey, we're using his idea. Here's how we're using it differently. So in the book, she's talking about the 10-10-1 goal part. And on 104, she says, to achieve a goal, you need to make sure you have clarity on two things. Number one, what are the specifics? Number two, how will you measure your progress? So we have specifics and we have measurable, which both come from the SMART goals model. And it may seem like a really small thing that she doesn't reference this obscure business journal from 1984, but that's not her idea. And it doesn't take anything away from her interpretation or how she's using it or why she thinks it's important for you to consider those two things. To put in a footnote, these two concepts are taken from the SMART goals model, who developed by so-and-so in 1984. So it may seem like a small thing that we're looking at, but it's not really. It's a really big philosophical approach.
I'm about to say, it's an attitude issue.
It's an attitude to who owns ideas and who has the privilege of using them and how you use them. And there's a real power in this, right? There's a lot of power that she wields with these ideas, and her TED Talks and her retreat and all of the things that she does. And she just needs to do a bit more work to show where she got those ideas from, because we all use other people's ideas all the time, but you have to give people credit who've done the work. And not doing it is, I don't think she does it from malice, I should say. I don't think she takes people's ideas with the intent maliciously, with the knowledge that she's doing it. I don't think she knows necessarily why this is so important and how to do it. But that's why we have copy editors.
Yeah, we have some questions for Thomas Nelson as well. But
yeah. So on that note, on this idea of kind of privilege and power, Dr. Donnelly definitely has some thoughts to add to our critique.
So, there's a thing in theology called the prosperity gospel, which is the belief that if you work really hard and or are a good person, you will be fabulously wealthy. It's appropriated from a verse in the Old Testament that doesn't mean what anyone thinks it means, and is used a whole lot to amass giant amounts of wealth for specific people. She pretty much uses it all the time. All of her language is a lot about, it's like just enough just enough Jesus that you'll be able to identify that she's a Christian, but she doesn't actually actively engage with any theology. So what's very fascinating to me is that there's a lot of conservative Christians who hate her, not because
she doesn't have enough theology,
because she talks entirely about being self-sufficient.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah. She mentions that she's kind of like, quote unquote, a bad Christian because she believes in self-care or something.
Yeah. And like I don't agree with them. Like self-care is not selfish, but her version of it is, because she doesn't give voices to anybody else in this book. She doesn't talk about any other women. She doesn't ever talk about times that she's struggled. She doesn't ever talk about times that things have been hard. She's that friend that drives you nuts at book club who sits down and goes, but my life's fantastic. Why isn't yours? Oh, you're just not working hard enough. She does talk about times that she struggled, but it always ends up positively.
And there's never an outright failure.
No.
There is never an outright mistake or a problem that is on everything else. Oh, I was really, really struggling with this. And then everything was better and everything was fine.
That's a huge part of evangelical prosperity gospel. Like we used to have a joke when I was growing up in evangelicalism that like my testimony in coming to God was more not as like amazing as some other people's, because like I wasn't an axe murderer at age 12 and I didn't like you know, like your struggles are to be redeemed in a certain way.
And you hadn't struggled enough.
Yeah. So her struggles are all redeemed, which means realistically, they're not the kind of struggles that like we're talking about. So we should say Catherine Beatty really unpacks this a little bit more than I am at this thing. But the issue for me is that this kind of ideas that if you just work hard and if you just, own your power and you stop apologizing and you follow all these steps that she gives you, that it's going to be hunky-dory is really damaging. She also uses some really derogatory language about people's bodies and their mental health and some things like that. She's a big fat shamer.
Physical health stuff where there was the one where it was like, and I wrote this a couple of times because one of our mantras here at Abbey Research is, right, different people are different.
Yeah.
And recognizing, as we said at the start, that we all have different needs, different experiences, different intersections, whatever. And she like talks about that, but she talks the talk, but she doesn't walk it. And there was a line where she was like, you want to be successful? Get up an hour earlier. Get up at 5 a.m. every morning. That's what I do. And I was like, no, I know my body and I know my sleep rhythms, and I am most effective if I sleep from midnight to 8 in the morning. But there was no space for that. It was, you will be more successful if you get up at 5 in the morning every day. And I was like, no, I won't. It will actually be detrimental to me if I got up every day at 5 in the morning.
Yeah. And she talks about being chubby as part of when she was a failure. So like all her language is very,
is her thinness now is part of her
success.
Yeah. Big problem.
So there's, so I'm legitimately like concerned that this book is potentially for some very mentally vulnerable people damaging. And so I have some concerns, and we're not alone, as we've said a million times in this, that we're not alone in those concerns. There's a real problem with the anti-intellectual bias in American evangelicalism. And that's one of the reasons that I'm thinking that Thomas Nelson, who is a Christian publisher under HarperCollins, who I think is who acquired her first book, and at least some of her staff is on this, they're not super concerned about intellectualism either.
Yeah.
Like this is an endemic problem. So in the same way that one of my problems with footnotes is that it doesn't ever, with a lack of them, is that it doesn't communicate that you understand that you're not alone, and that you understand that you stand on the shoulders of giants and like all that kind of other stuff. It's a very independent cowboy focus of ideas, which stresses me out because that is so far from how human knowledge actually works.
Yeah. And there's a time where at the stop asking permission, behavior 1, where she really, really briefly touches on feminism, and says, this chapter is about the truth that most cultures have been set up since the beginning of time as patriarchal. That's an example of like, that's not your idea. where did you get that information? How
and
do
what
you
is most
know?
cultures, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's, you know, not all cultures are patriarchal. Like, it's an oversimplification, and this perception that being intellectual, doing the research, you know, finding the footnotes for that,
or
isn't necessary.
Yeah, or is for those nerds, or like.
But I mean, we're two gender studies ladies, and that is, you can't reduce feminism to a couple of throwaway sentences, or the patriarchy to a couple of throwaway sentences, and call it a day.
And also, I mean, one of the things with that I love the Protestant Reformation for is this idea that education is for everyone and everybody could read the Bible and you didn't need to be ordained, and it's beautiful. But the flip side of that is that there's a huge push in conservative evangelicalism that you shouldn't have, that the only training you need, the only wisdom that you need comes from the Holy Spirit and comes to you from God. And that is what she is exhibiting here, is that bias. I mean, like, yeah, she's a bad Christian now, quote unquote. I don't care. I don't think she is. I don't make judgments like that. But what she is very clearly steeped in the culture that says you don't need a college degree, you don't need an ordination certificate, you are the best interpreter of your own life, which is, from my very learned opinion, complete garbage. So you're just not. You're just not. And
I think what that points to is your point about like recognizing that you're not alone.
No.
And it's one thing to be, you know, primary in interpreting your own life. But it's another thing to turn that interpretation around and put it on everybody else. And say, this is what I find works best for my life. And you therefore do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's what I have a problem with.
Yeah.
And coupling that with the fact that she doesn't, aside from, you know, some of her friends and her husband, she doesn't say or give credit to all of the people that have helped her along the way.
No.
Except for the acknowledgments where she talks a little bit. But like in terms of the ideas and the motivation and all the books that she's clearly read, or TED Talks she's watched, or podcasts she's listened to.
Like we pick up knowledge everywhere. Like,
we do.
Like, I mean, when I was babysitting, I would pick up knowledge from Dora the Explorer. Like, you pick up knowledge from everywhere. And like, we don't want to say that like she's, I guess, like, I mean, the best way I can say it is I've worked for people who assume that they are the standard for everybody else, and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
And that is very, very much what I think she's doing, as you've said. But then the real, what it comes down to is that she doesn't give allowances or permission for mess. And that's really, really troubling.
Yeah.
In terms of the content, like you covered the structure and the problems with the structure. My problem with the content is that she doesn't leave any room for mess.
Because mess is always somewhere you were in her book, and it's not somewhere you are now. So like a lot of her stuff is, you know, you're struggling with this, you're apologizing for everything, you need to work on your behaviors and your habits, blah, blah, blah. But she's coming at it from the part where it's all fixed, while saying at the same time that she's still learning and she's still growing. Like it's really weird how she manages to do both. Because I don't think she sells herself as a perfect person. I don't think she thinks she is, or that she has everything fixed. But then the way she writes about it is that she does have it all.
But it's a very specific form of mess that she propagates, which is not accurate.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like we talked a little bit about Sheryl Sandberg, like talking about you should lean in, and we're like, cool, but not everyone can afford a nanny. Like, it's that kind of like, but be really, we could just keep going on and on. So
clearly,
no shame to people who find her really inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, if it works for you,
go with God.
Great, that's wonderful. We all need to find things that resonate with us, but we would like you to hopefully have watched this and come away with an understanding of the importance of engaging with ideas critically.
Yeah.
And And even if you think someone is really inspirational and really amazing and you love how their words make you feel, you still need to take a step back and say, oh, yes, okay, but where did, I mean, like, one of the article was, what, girls stop plagiarizing, or I forget.
Yeah, girl get some footnotes.
Girl get some footnotes. I mean, I read through this and I said to myself, like, girl, that's not your idea. Mm-hmm. Girl, that's not your idea. Where did you get that from? I just started writing citation in the side of the margins
and
every time.
This was, yeah. And like, if this is a conversation with your friend, I don't expect you to cite footnotes, but she's making money on this. She's making money on the labor of other people.
On the labor of other people. Yeah. Yeah. And that's fundamentally what's really, really wrong with plagiarism, right? Is when you're profiting
either by a grade, a degree, or physical money off the labor of other people.
From an idea that's not yours.
Yep.
And that's really what gets at both of us on the deep level of this. There's lots of structural issues. There's lots of conceptual issues, but like, this is going to be a New York Times bestseller again, like probably pretty easily.
I'm sure it already is.
And girl.
Yeah, we got this as part of a subscription box that we're a part of.
Yeah.
I personally would not have spent money on this.
Nope.
I'm frustrated that I did in the form of that subscription box.
Yeah.
But from all the Facebook comments on that subscription box's Facebook group, God, people are worshiping at the altar of Rachel.
Oh yeah. 100. So, yeah.
I don't have the energy to deify anyone anymore, but that's cool.
Yeah, that's problematic for another reason.
Yeah. So on that note, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. This has been our conversation about the brand of Rachel Hollis, not the human of Rachel Hollis.
Very two different things.
So again, I'm Dr. Donnelly.
I'm Dr. Hinson.
We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.